when they announced my name, the entire back crew started singing Gilliam's Island, which I would have loved to have heard. If you guys could have piped that over, that would have been awesome. So, can everyone stand up? Alright, so it's like low blood sugar part of the day, you've been sitting for too long. If we weren't doing this right now, at some point, hopefully I wouldn't yawn, but one of you would yawn. If one of you yawns, what happens? Everyone else yawns. So before we get started, I just want you to think in the back of your head. Go ahead and sit down, thank you. You can stand up if you want. If we had more time, we'd be climbing all over the place, but we don't. So what I want you to think about in the back of your head before we get started, and just hold it back there, is this idea that we are wired to copy one another. You're yawning when someone else yawns for a reason. How can we take that as a basic idea and think about that as a tactic for how we build change? What would it take what would it take someone else doing for you to want to follow? What could you do that might get someone else to follow? So, it's a really scorchingly hot Tuesday afternoon, July 24th, in South Chicago on a really pretty rough corner in this community called Roseland. And despite it being scorchingly hot, despite it being this time of day, that there's almost this palpable feeling on a regular basis of frustration in the community, because about that time of day, people start rolling in to buy drugs and alcohol. But on this day, Jania's smiling. Jania's a 17-year-old from that community. Not only is she smiling, but if you look around, there's some pats in the back, a couple high fives. She's not the only one. So what did that? What got them to that just subtle shift? Well, earlier that day, second day in this design build program that we ran, they simply went out and built benches. I mean, work benches so that they could do all of their design work for redesigning this pocket park spot, this lot that was given to them. They just went outside and made them on the sidewalk. First time using power tools. And of course Jania is smiling because of that, because power tools are awesome. And building things are awesome. And building cool things is really awesome, right? But really the high fives, the smiling, is what that caused. So this is the space. So directly across from the space, right where you guys are sitting, if you were there right now, at that point, there would have been, or right before then, there would have been broken bottles and needles all over this massive lot. And so, a little bit later in the afternoon, right before this point, was stunning, was whether through inspiration or embarrassment, in response to the girls actually being out on the sidewalk, using power tools and building stuff, the community silently went and cleaned up this lot, which hadn't been cleaned up for years. Over the next couple days, they continued to build. They got better and better with power tools. They did temporary installations in this lot that was given to them by the church. They explored what was possible. They, tried different sorts of mock-ups. We do everything full scale. We don't draw. We mock up everything at full scale. So they're constantly out there experimenting and building. And people are coming up and talking. And not just anyone. On one hand, you have the cops who are coming up, who are pretty vilified in that neighborhood. But you're also having gang members come up. If there had been one male that was part of that team, they wouldn't have been there. But because these were teenage women, you were getting hundreds, this sort of incredible swath of society in that neighborhood. And these people were actually authentically engaging in what that space could be, what the highest means for that space, the highest use for that space would be. And so over that first week, after interviewing hundreds of people, they found that actually the community thought this space needed to be a neutral space for little children in the neighborhood. And so, of course, working with metaphor, thank God they didn't choose Belgium, because a Belgian playground would suck. Modeled off after the landscape, but Switzerland. You can start to see it here, right? These are the mountains, here's your river, their valleys, their big meadows. And so they started building, designing and building this neutral space, this neutral country in between these two churches, which actually were kind of at war, strangely enough. In South Chicago, the girls dug holes, they learned how to pour concrete, they learned how to do all sorts of crazy sailor knots to figure out how to make this happen. They started building this deck, so they got really good with levels. And one day, this gentleman comes up and he gives, just without word, gives the girls a $20 bill. And kind of raised this question. Well, we hadn't been asking for money. So all of a sudden the girls just put out a box. Quickly that 20 grows to 75, that 75 grows to 200, that 200 eventually grew to over $1,000 on a corner where $2 is a lot of money. And not only were people giving money, but they wanted to help, even if they didn't know how. Look at Harold's neck right there. That is tension. That's him. He's not arguing. He's trying with all his might to figure out how to help these young ladies. He's never seen anything like this. Teenage women with power tools. I mean, he's a carpenter. He's like, what is my role here? And he couldn't quite figure it out, but he kept coming back again and again to try to figure it out. And everyone kind of looked at him every day a little bit perplexed, like, what the hell are you talking about? Prostitution, major challenge in that neighborhood. In fact, right at the back of the lot was this major alley where prostitution occurred. So the women in the community were coming up multiple times a day, like Cheryl, and pretty much going, hell yeah, rock on. And then there are people like Big Ron. Love Big Ron. Big Ron, it wasn't just that Big Ron wanted to come help, and he brought his truck, which was really helpful, but Big Ron went out and got other people like Roy. And not only did people come and help, but they stayed. In fact, they stayed so long that I ended up building until 10:30, 11:30, 12:30, 1:30 at night, because people were so driven to do this. Space got better, cooler, and not only at a certain point did it become clear that we were making this incredible space that had value for the community, but through our regular reflective process, which is hugely important in this type of work, this started to happen. It became very evident this was not just Christiana, this was all 11 girls. And so in making this space, ultimately we had a really cool space. We had these super empowered teenagers. We had actually two liquor stores got temporarily shut down because of the girls' actions. And to this day, there has not been a piece of trash that's appeared on that site, which was otherwise full of trash. But this was one of the most powerful things. That this community was formerly known as a community of hope. Today, or at that time, and it probably still is today, was known as a community of no hope. And it was amazing to see that these young ladies had started to affect some change there. And it's really powerful moment if you think back to that yawn. Who is the highest means to do that? If we took those ladies out of the equation, if we replaced them with you, would that have happened? No. If we replaced it with older women, would that have happened? Probably not. If we had replaced the teenage women with men, would that have happened? These ladies were the highest means to accomplish what we had done. But it's also really helpful to think that they weren't alone. I was there. And I have no desire to trumpet who I am. But we really need, as designers and educators and the like, to think very critically in a binary way about our contributions. What we're capable of bringing to the table, how we're capable of helping. That's where innovation occurs. So that project is part of this larger project called Tiny WPA that we launched, which is about finding these needs in cities where youth can actually have, well, their contribution can have a transformative impact. Sometimes it's about repairing. Sometimes it's about gathering the data and stories that substantiate change. Sometimes that's just about getting adults to behave themselves when they've lost their ever-loving minds. So, why did that happen? Why did the effect in the sort of situation in Roseland occur? And let me be clear, this happens a lot in my work. I'm really lucky to get to see this. But there's some really great lessons that sort of extend beyond youth that you can take back into what you do. Number one, move your design studio, your classroom, city hall, and your community meeting to the sidewalk. Make design visible. And when you're designing and building incredible things that no one thinks is possible, not doing art projects, you're not doing a mosaic. A mosaic is not necessarily about problem solving. I'm sorry if I'm offending any artists here. But you're actually solving a problem. Not only do you have these situations where teenagers or anyone in that context, their learning is much more relevant and meaningful, so they're going to work their butts off. And that would be true for any one of you. But because you're out on the sidewalk designing and building, people are coming up to you the whole time. They're giving you thumbs up. They're asking questions. And very quickly, even within the span of an hour, people are supercharged. They realize the power and the sort of sense of self-efficacy that would take often years to happen otherwise. But it also creates this seamless feedback loop between community. There's no divide. It's right there. You are there every day. You're utterly predictable. People know where to find you. So at the same time, think back about the yawn, you have teenagers, young adults who are prototyping behaviors that adults have forgotten. People are modeling. People are thinking, well, if a kid can do it, why can't I? We start with building. And we start with building because building is a conversation tool. It is research. Some of these problems in the world are so complex that you cannot have a logical, or the systems are so broken that you cannot have a logical conversation about it. The only way you can figure it out is by getting out there and doing something. At the same time, you're creating, because it's tangible, because it's in context, you can have much deeper conversations with people in a community, whatever that is, about what you're doing. They can give you better ideas that leads to more innovation. Stop making things easy. One of the reasons that project worked in Roseland is because we had 2 weeks to do that, from nothing to playground. It was a rallying cry. It brought people together. It forced people together, just like this adventure playground we did in 2 weeks in Philadelphia. We have to take the time to grow cultures of greatness. And building and making and doing is an essential tool for that. Everyone likes to make things. But it doesn't have to be massive. One of the most important factors there is actually time, not necessarily size. So this lovely thing right here, there were 2 other bus stop prototypes in Flint, Michigan that we did. That took Shay and 11 other teenagers 14 hours to do. I'm not even showing you the impact that it had there on the community. But that's what you can accomplish just by doing something. You don't have to build. We make 8-foot-long chocolate cake models of neighborhoods with communities. Making things in general can be your pathway just to starting that conversation. So don't get me wrong. I don't think youth can save the world. Again, it's coming back to those very binary needs. Maybe it's even just hope. Trying to find those opportunities where individuals, youth, or community can have a transformative impact. Regardless, they can't do it alone. And most of those solutions that I think exist, or the problems that exist in our cities, they can be best solved by multi-generational and multidisciplinary teams, where each person at that table is the highest means to solve that problem. That's when really interesting things happen, when you know that you're the best person there to solve that. So, who's ready to be a building hero?